The new dungeon in Destiny 2, Warlord's Ruin, is an absolute masterpiece, but I have one huge issue with it, and we'll get to that in just a moment, because the first thing I want to do is give a small bit of praise to Bungie for putting together a well-made piece of content. This new dungeon, in my opinion, is the best of all the dungeons that have ever come out in Destiny 2. Why is that, you might ask? Well, first off, we have the aesthetics and visuals of it, which of course are very good, and we've kind of come to expect that for Destiny 2 at this point in time. Bungie has mastered the art of the skybox at this point, but that's not my biggest reason why I think this dungeon is the best. What it comes down to for me is that there are 3 boss encounters that we fight. Normally in a lot of dungeons and even raids in recent years, there's usually an encounter that we jump into that does not have a boss we actually fight. We basically just have to run around and do certain objectives, interact with this, run back all the way to that side of the map, come back again and interact, stand on plate, shoot symbol. There's a lot of tedious encounters within Destiny 2 in previous dungeons and in raids, but this dungeon does not have that. We've got 3 bosses with dynamic and unique mechanics that are just honestly fun to play against. After playing this game for 9 years now, rarely am I surprised by Bungie introducing something new to the game that's actually really successful, but that's exactly what this dungeon did. Some new mechanics were introduced and they actually work properly. Now, are they some revolutionary, mind-blowing mechanics? No, but keep in mind that this is an activity that is meant to be soloed. That is one of the triumphs, so I think it's important to manage expectations when it comes to these mechanics. I would never expect from a dungeon for there to be some sort of mind-blowing new thing that I would have never thought of before, because that's really not the time and place for this. That's more for raids in my opinion, and I am looking for that when it comes to the Final Shape raid with the Witness. But let's start from the beginning. You spawn in on the side of a snowy mountain, traverse your way up the mountain, which is very cool. I personally really enjoy the vertical traversals, and obviously if you're using Strand Grapple, you can sort of take shortcuts with this stuff. But if you don't use Strand Grapple, it's quite the adventure getting around the mountain and getting into the prison. When we get to that first boss, you don't really see anything particularly special or amazing about them. They look like your typical big scorn baddie, but then in the middle of the encounter, all of a sudden you are teleported and warped into a small cage to which you have to shoot 3 blights to escape from. A very cool mechanic and something that I don't know that we've ever seen before. We have previously seen bosses launch us or teleport us to different locations, but they've never particularly trapped us in cages from what I remember that we have to shoot ourselves to escape. I could be wrong here, but it felt unique in its application at least, and I personally really enjoyed it. Afterwards, you jump out, you stand within a totem. If you can activate that totem, then you'll go to the damage phase for the boss. For the first boss, it's a very short damage time period, so it's all about burst DPS and using burst DPS weapons. After you kill that boss, you're then teleported into an actual prison where you're locked in and you have to solve a puzzle. Now, a lot of times Bungie puzzles can be so simplistic or unchallenging that they're not very fun, or alternatively they can be like Niobe Labs and be too challenging. This one was the perfect balance in my opinion, because the 2 biggest hints were that there were skeletons pointing to numbers, and although it left everyone in our fire team and probably everyone in the world shaking their head thinking, the numbers, Mason, what do they mean? Eventually realizing that there are buttons on the wall that you can shoot to activate and a switch that you can pull, which stops all of the buttons from moving. So basically you know that you have to push those buttons and have them go one direction, either left or right, and then push the lever. Once you figure that part out, it's very easy to see exactly what you needed to do, which is that the skeleton's arms point either to the left or to the right, letting you know which direction you have to spin the buttons. And once you finally solved that and shot the lever, it felt very cool to escape that prison section. Kudos to Bungie for coming up with a both challenging puzzle and one that wasn't extremely trivial. It had that perfect balance that I personally really liked. After escaping the prison, you then had to traverse through this like crazy underground cavern. After escaping that, you have to go through this crazy maze. There's Scorn everywhere trying to fight you, deadly spike traps that activate if you walk by them, very easy to get lost, and then mysterious chests spawn. You can interact with them and sometimes they give you loot, or sometimes Screebs spawn in and kill you. I love that section of this encounter as well, only to then finally escape and get out of there, to then continue to climb this massive mountain to finally find yourself at the Ogre encounter. Shooting the Blight starts this encounter, and then of course once the big Scorn guy spawns in, you have to experience that winter mechanic, which was a new mechanic and one that I thought was actually pretty fun and challenging. It just added an extra layer of complexity to doing the encounter. After killing the Ogre, you then traverse even further up the mountain until you finally get to the summit, and once you're up there, we of course fight another variation of the giant Taken Meatball. And initially I wasn't really impressed with this being the final boss, but due to the actual traversal area and how you have to fight this boss and how you have to keep ascending higher and higher, honestly feel like this is a good boss encounter. The mechanics are extremely intricate it. There's enough layers to them that it adds a level of complexity and really kind of just added the cherry on the cake to this dungeon. A very, very fun experience, but there is one issue that I have with this, like I mentioned at the start of this video, and that is the loot. The weapons that you get from doing this dungeon are subpar. Why, Bungie? Why does it have to be this way? You make such an amazing piece of content that people would want to play over and over and over again to grind out good weapons and armor, but then you put bad weapons in it. That being said, the new rocket pistol is creative and interesting. I like where Bungie went with that, but unfortunately it doesn't really have any good application in the game at this point in time. The sniper being a strand sniper means that it's technically weaker than any kinetic sniper. If you don't know, elemental weapons do 15% less damage to unshielded combatants than kinetic weapons. This is a mechanic within the sandbox that is in regards to a trade-off system. Elemental weapons are meant to do more damage to shielded combatants, and non-elemental weapons, i.e. kinetic weapons, are meant to do more damage to non-shielded combatants. So kinetic snipers will outclass the strand sniper every single time. Then we have a caster frame sword, which I don't even need to get into. That is just not very good for boss damage, for ad clear, for really anything. Oh, and as a side note, the strand sniper also doesn't have good rolls for PvP. Now let's see, we had the sniper, we had the sword, and we had the sidearm. Am I forgetting one? Oh, that's right, there's a bow as well. And this bow, unfortunately, is also strand. It can get double damage perks though, which is really interesting, with precision instrument and explosive head, but however, keep in mind that it's not a kinetic weapon, so any kinetic bow will outclass it because of that 15% damage reduction to unshielded combatants, which basically means that Archer's Tempo is nullified for this weapon, meaning it only has one damage perk, Precision Instrument. And I know some of you out there might be questioning and wondering, does Lucky know what he's talking about on this topic? Yes, I've done my homework. I know exactly what I'm talking about in regards to the strand weapons. Unfortunately, kinetic weapons just do more. It's an unfortunate sandbox design, and you might be thinking to yourself, well, what about activities that have strand surge on them? Then the bow and the sniper would excel in those activities. But keep in mind that if your subclass matches the surge, your kinetic weapons will benefit from the plus 25% damage bonus, meaning that if there's strand surge and solar surge and you're using a strand class or a solar class, then your kinetic bow or kinetic sniper will do 25% more damage. And the reason why Bungie did that is because there is no kinetic surge in any playlist activities. So again, the sniper and the bow are hard power crept by kinetic weapons that already currently exist in Destiny 2. The rocket sidearm is cool and creative, but not very powerful, except against anti-barrier champions, I will say that. And then the caster frame sword is outclassed by all other swords, because it's not very good for boss damage and you really don't want to use a sword for ad clear. So we're left with an amazing piece of content, a true masterpiece with this dungeon, just with crappy weapons that don't make you want to grind this activity a ton, which feels so unfortunate. If the weapons were better, this dungeon could quite literally carry this season out for this extended period of time. Bungie has missed the mark so much by not making these weapons good that I have to lower my rating of this dungeon substantially, where I was initially going to rate this dungeon a 9.5 out of 10 due to the crap weapons. I now have to give it a rating of 8 out of 10. Let me know how you rate the new dungeon down in the comment section below, and let me know your thoughts while you're at it, and click on the screen here to watch another video from this channel. And if you're feeling thirsty out there, make sure to use code LUCKY10P to save some money on G Fuel. Also, make sure you're following me on Twitch and Kick. I go live all the time playing Destiny 2. Lastly, make sure you're following me on X, Instagram, and TikTok, where I deliver Destiny 2 news to you daily. I appreciate all the followers out there.